I was sitting in the dimly lit living room, my hands trembling as I clutched the phone. The air felt thick, suffocating almost. Solomon was standing across from me, his face twisted with a mixture of anger and confusion. We had been married for over 15 years, but lately, everything felt wrong. There were too many cracks in the foundation of our relationship, cracks I had ignored for too long. But now, everything was coming to light. I took a deep breath and tapped the play button on the audio file I had been keeping hidden for weeks. I'll divorce my wife soon. I'll marry you right after. I'll protect you for the rest of your life. Solomon's voice echoed in the room. My stomach churned as I listened to the sweet promises he had made to another woman, while I had been living in this broken marriage, oblivious to his betrayal. Solomon's face turned pale when he realized what I was playing. His eyes widened, and his jaw tightened in an attempt to mask his guilt. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. It was as if he had been caught in the act, unable to escape the web of lies he had woven. "Why do you have this?" he demanded, his voice shaking. "This," I replied coolly, "is just part of the evidence collected by the detective agency. There's more, a lot more." I paused for a moment, letting the weight of my words sink in. Then, I pulled up a photo from the stack of evidence and showed it to him. It was a picture of Solomon, walking into a hotel with another woman, their arms linked together intimately. Solomon's eyes darted around, and his face reddened. "You hired a detective?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "Using my money for such nonsense?" Caught off guard by his sudden accusation, I was momentarily at a loss for words. How could he turn this around on me? But I quickly regained my composure. "No," I said, my voice firm. "I used my own savings. I didn't touch your money." His eyes narrowed, clearly not believing me. "There's no way you could have had the money for this. What, did you not know that I was recently promoted to department manager? I'm making quite a bit now." I blinked, surprised by his tone. Solomon was trying to turn the focus onto himself, but it wasn't working. "You never cared about my career," I said, my voice steady despite the boiling anger inside me. "You never even listened when I tried to tell you about it." The truth was, Solomon had never been interested in anything I did. When I started working my way up the ranks at my company, moving from a basic sales clerk to a department manager, I had tried to share my success with him. But every time I did, he shrugged it off with a disinterested, "Work talk, spare me." I had always been the one who held things together. I worked hard to earn promotions, to bring in bonuses, to cover our expenses. While Solomon focused on his career and his selfish desires, I quietly carried the weight of our lives on my shoulders. I paused, gathering my thoughts. Had we had children, I don't think my career would have advanced the way it did, I said softly. And maybe that's why I've come to this decision. Solomon looked at me, still not understanding. "What decision?" "The decision to divorce you," I said, my voice cold, the words finally coming out as I had intended. "I'm done with this marriage. I've had enough." The silence between us was deafening. For a moment, Solomon just stared at me, his face blank. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, he suddenly shifted tactics. "You don't get to do this." He spat, his voice venomous. "If you divorce me, you'll need to give me half of your savings. That's how division of property works, right?" The audacity of his words took me by surprise. My heart pounded in my chest as I fought to remain calm. "You think I'm going to give you anything?" I replied sharply. "Number. You'll have to speak to my lawyer." "A lawyer?" Solomon's voice cracked with disbelief. "You already have a lawyer for this?" "Of course I do," I said, my gaze unwavering. "I'm not dealing with you alone anymore." For the first time, Solomon looked genuinely afraid. His face turned pale as the reality of the situation hit him. But we can work this out, right? You're not really going to go through with this, are you?" His voice was small, pleading, as if he thought he could talk his way out of it. I shook my head. You never listened to me. You never cared. And now you want to act like we can just fix this? It's too late, Solomon. The look on his face was one of utter disbelief. Please, he begged, his voice trembling. I'll change. I'll help with my mom's care. I'll do whatever it takes. Please don't divorce me. You're all I have left. I stood there staring at him, the man I had once loved. But now, he was nothing more than a shell of the person he used to be. His tears, his desperate pleas, they meant nothing to me. The betrayal, the lies, the neglect. It had all piled up to this point. You've already done too much damage, I said, my voice colder than I intended. You can't just undo years of hurt with a few empty promises. Solomon's face crumpled, and he collapsed to the floor, his hands clutching at the carpet as though begging for mercy. I'm sorry. I'll never cheat again. I'll help with my mother. Please, just stay. But I knew better. His words meant nothing. They were just a last-ditch effort to keep me tied to him, to keep me from walking away. I had made my decision, and there was no turning back. I took a step toward the door, my mind made up. As I reached for the handle, I heard him call out to me one last time. Wait! You can't leave! I don't have any money! My savings are gone! I spent it all on the stripper. I used my mom's pension to get by. I stopped dead in my tracks. You spent your savings on a stripper? My voice was barely a whisper, disbelief choking me. And now you're borrowing from your mother's pension? Solomon looked away, unable to meet my eyes. His shame was written all over his face. I had to. She's all I wanted. She made me feel alive again. I shook my head in disbelief. You're a disgrace, I muttered under my breath. Using your own mother's pension, your own money, all for your selfish desires. The pain I had felt for so many years, the frustration, the loneliness, it all came rushing back. But now, I was free. I wasn't bound to him anymore. I turned back to face Solomon, my voice cold and final. I don't care that you're broke. You can't keep using people, especially not your own mother. I'm done. And I'm going to make sure you don't get away with anything. Solomon's face twisted with rage. You can't do this. You can't leave me like this. I gave him one last, long look. I'm already gone, I said. And there's nothing you can do about it. With that, I walked out the door and into the unknown. The days following the divorce were a whirlwind of emotions and decisions. Solomon had sold the house and land to pay the alimony, but I knew it was too little. Too late. I didn't care about the money. I cared about my peace of mind, my future. I settled into a small apartment near my parents' home. They had always been there for me, and after everything I had gone through, their support was a balm to my wounded soul. I was starting over, and though the journey ahead was uncertain, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. Solomon, on the other hand, was left with nothing. His relationship with the stripper had ended in disaster, and he found himself alone, banned from the club where he had spent so much of his time and money. His life was in shambles, and for once, I didn't feel sorry for him. As I began this new chapter, I realized I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. Solomon's actions had shattered me, but they had also propelled me toward the person I was becoming. I was free, and that freedom was the most precious thing I had. Days passed, and Solomon's desperate calls became a constant background noise in my life. But I had made up my mind. There was no going back. Each day I woke up in my new apartment. The air around me felt lighter. The weight of Solomon's presence had been a burden I no longer had to carry. It was strange, almost surreal, how one decision could so completely change everything. I had always been the one who held the family together. Solomon, with his demands, his distractions, and his endless expectations, had become the center of my exhaustion. Even when I was promoted at work and earned more than I ever thought possible, I remained in the background, supporting him, trying to make things work. Now, in my new life, I could finally breathe. One afternoon, as I sat on the balcony of my rented apartment, watching the world outside, I received a call. The number was blocked, but I recognized the voice immediately. "Joyce, it's me." "Solomon," he said, his voice hoarse, almost pleading. I felt my stomach churn, not because I was scared or worried, but because of the overwhelming disgust that crept up on me. "I don't want to talk to you," I replied coldly. "There's nothing left for us to discuss." "But I'm sorry," he continued, his tone desperate. "I realize now how wrong I was. You have to understand. I was lost. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I felt a bitter laugh rise in my chest but suppressed it. "You think an apology can undo years of betrayal?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. "You've humiliated me, Solomon. And now you're sorry? Now you want to fix it? It's too late." He sighed on the other end. "I never thought this would happen. I didn't realize how much you meant to me until now." I closed my eyes, shaking my head as I listened to his words. "You're delusional if you think I'm going to believe that. This is just another one of your tricks to get me back under your control." His silence was deafening. For a moment, I thought he might hang up, but instead he said, "I've lost everything, Joyce. I'm sorry for what I did. I don't know where to go from here. I can't even take care of my mom properly. I'm in over my head." That last sentence hit me like a slap in the face. He had abandoned his mother, too. The woman who had always treated me poorly, whose expectations were impossibly high, had never been a real mother to me. Yet, here Solomon was, pleading for my help. I sighed deeply. "Solomon, I don't care about you anymore. I don't care about your mother, or your mistakes, or your future. You've made your bed, and now you have to lie in it. Please," he begged, his voice breaking. "I don't know what to do. I've been a fool." "You were always a fool, Solomon," I said, barely able to keep the venom out of my voice. "And you're still a fool. I'm not going to save you. Not anymore." He started to say something else, but I hung up on him, not wanting to hear any more of his lies. He was the one who had burned every bridge, and now he was the one who had to deal with the consequences. For years, I had put his needs before my own, but no more. Now, I was going to focus on myself. Life after the divorce was oddly peaceful. I spent my days working hard at my job, which had become more fulfilling than ever. With Solomon out of my life, there were no more distractions, no more excuses. I started to focus on the things I had neglected for so long. I began to rediscover hobbies I had abandoned, like painting, cooking, and hiking, things that used to make me feel alive but had been pushed aside in the chaos of my marriage. There was a certain power in being alone, in standing on your own 2 feet after years of being tied down. The loneliness that had once felt like a prison now felt like freedom. I had my own space, my own life. I could be myself without fear of judgment or ridicule. However, there were still moments when the memories of Solomon crept back into my mind, uninvited. It was impossible to forget the man I had once loved, even if he had become someone unrecognizable. I found myself wondering what had happened to him. Was he truly capable of change? Or had he always been this selfish, this shallow? But those questions only brought me back to the painful truth that I had spent too long asking myself why. It was time to stop asking why and start focusing on what was next for me. And that, I knew, was a journey I had to take alone. A few weeks later, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Solomon's lawyer. The divorce had been finalized, and the assets had been divided, but Solomon had made one final request. He was asking for a second chance to meet and talk about what went wrong. I almost laughed when I read it. A second chance? After everything? He was still trying to manipulate me, trying to reel me back into his world of lies and dysfunction. It was almost comical how he thought I would just forgive him and come back to him, especially after everything he had done. But as I sat there reading his letter, I realized something. This wasn't about me anymore. This was about him. He had no one left to control, no one left to deceive. And that was the punishment he deserved. The fact that he was still grasping at straws, trying to fix something that was beyond repair, was a fitting end to the story of us. I tore up the letter without a second thought. There was no need to respond. Solomon would have to face the consequences of his actions on his own, just as I had done. Months passed, and the peace in my life became more and more pronounced. It felt as though the cloud that had hung over me for so long had finally lifted. The weight of Solomon's presence, the constant tension in the house, the silent fights, I no longer carried any of that. Instead, I was free. One evening, I found myself having dinner with my parents. They had always supported me, even when I married Solomon, despite their reservations. They had stood by me when things were tough, and now they were the ones who made me feel whole again. I realized just how much I had taken them for granted over the years. "You seem different," my mom said one night, watching me with a smile. "You look happier." I smiled back, feeling a warmth spread through me. "I am, Mom. I really am." "You've been through a lot," she said gently. "But we're always here for you, Joyce. You don't have to go through anything alone." Her words brought tears to my eyes. It wasn't just the divorce that had been hard. It was the realization that I had spent so many years feeling like I wasn't enough, like I didn't matter. But now, I knew better. I was enough. I was worthy of happiness, of peace, and of love. As the months turned into a year, I continued to grow stronger. I had even started dating again, though cautiously. I wasn't in a rush to jump into another relationship, but the thought of sharing my life with someone again wasn't as terrifying as it once had been. I was different now. I had learned the hard way what I needed and what I didn't. And when the time came for me to remarry, I would do it on my own terms, with someone who truly understood me and valued me. But for now, I was content. I had my independence. I had my life. And that was all I needed. The last time I heard from Solomon, it was a simple text message. "I'm sorry for everything. I've lost everything, and it's all my fault. I will never forget what you did for me, even if you never want to see me again." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The message was just another attempt to regain control, to get me to feel sorry for him. But I didn't. I had moved on, and I was finally at peace. Solomon's future was his own to figure out. But for me, my future was brighter than I had ever imagined. I wasn't defined by the failures of my past, nor by the man who had failed me. I was free, and that, more than anything, was enough. And so, as the years went by, I learned that sometimes the best way to move forward is to let go. To let go of the past, of toxic relationships, and of the people who never truly valued you. Because once you let go, you make room for something better, something more fulfilling. And for the first time in a long time, I was living the life I had always deserved. And I would never look back.